Hi, everyone. This is John Daly. I'm here again with Bernie Goldberg for another episode of the No BS Zone. Today, as you can see, we have a very special guest. You know him from the Dispatch, News Nation, the Ink Stained Wretches podcast, and formerly Fox News, the one and only Chris Stirewalt. How's it going today, Chris?
Thank God there's only one. I don't think America is ready for double the Stirewalt. It's so nice to be with you guys. And I've been thinking today about what BS stands for. I can't come up with anything. I'm not sure, but we're gonna get our best. We're gonna get our best guys on that coming down to it. I can't fathom it. But I want to just say that Bernie, I have admired your work for a long time. John, I've admired your travel for a long time. But that it's a pleasure to be with you all.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. We're both fans of yours. And we know it's been a very busy day, Chris, so I'm going to go ahead and hand things right over to Bernie to start things off. Does that sound good, Bernie? Are you ready?
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to make a few observations about the media, short, brief observations, and I'm going to shut up and let you talk. When my first book, Bias, came out, one of the points I made, you hear a siren, by the way?
Yeah,
They
it'll
were
pass.
coming for me, but now they're gone. Now they're gone.
One of the points I made was that despite what a lot of conservatives thought, there was no conspiracy to slant the news. TV anchors didn't come in the morning and say, how are we going to get those Republicans? How are we going to get those conservatives? It didn't work that way. It was simply too many like-minded people in the newsroom. It was a product of groupthink. I think I was right back then, but I don't think it's true anymore. I think today, producers and opinion people do come in the morning and in the evening and say, if we're a conservative outfit, how are we going to get Joe Biden today? If we're MSNBC, how are we going to get Donald Trump or some liberal, some conservative today? I think there is a conspiracy in that regard. That's my take. What's yours?
Well, I think that I wouldn't use the word conspiracy. I would say that there are market pressures that demand slavish obedience to partisanship. I think that the act of courage, your book informed a lot of my thinking. That book was an important book in my coming of age as a journalist. That was an important book for me because you were being courageous to say something out loud that everybody knew was true. I think the story of groupthink is still very real. I think, and I talk about it in my book, which is but a pale imitation. I talk about it in my book. I use the example of the energy business. So I grew up in West Virginia. My father was a coal salesman. Who works in the energy business? People who are they're more male than female. They're from West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and the Dakotas. Red states, two of the reddest states in the whole country. So more female than male from those states, even before you get to the bias part, the unintentional bias part. If you just took a random sampling of men from those states, you'd have a much more Republican than Democratic group. And we have to think about the differences in what kinds of media outlets. But when we talk about what we used to think of as the legacy media or the prestige media or the mainstream media, where's everybody from? They're from the Northeast Corridor. They're from Boston to DC. There's always one guy from Chicago. There's some chick from LA and a guy from Miami. And then that's basically it, right? So you have the people who come from the same places. They go to the same schools. They hire people who are like them, and fish don't know they're wet, right? So you have an industry that's more female than male. You have an industry that draws heavily from deeply blue places in the country, like Maryland, like Massachusetts, like DC, New York, Philadelphia. So before you even begin, like no one in West Virginia could go eat their biscuits and gravy in peace for 2 years because somebody was coming to their diner to say, Was it more the racism or economic insecurity that caused you to vote for Donald Trump? Because there was a total unawareness
Right.
of what people in the interior of the country, in places like where I grew up, what people were thinking and what they were doing. So that part is still true. But then I think you point to the other part that has made things much more dangerous and much worse, which is in a segmented media landscape where trying to hold on to just a few. I don't know what 60 Minutes' peak viewership was, but it was many millions of people, right? And it's in its peak moment, 60 Minutes, and all of the evening newscasts had viewership shares that the top-rated show on Fox News looks like a rounding error
Exactly.
in those numbers. So if I have fewer consumers of my product, I am at risk of capture by those consumers. And I'll shut up right after I say this. The term the media scholar Andre Meir coined was post-journalism. So in journalism, the idea is we have information, we will give it to you, and in exchange, we will either sell your attention to people who are selling mattresses and Buicks, or you'll pay us a subscription, and that's how it's a top-down transaction. We've flipped it around. And now in order to cultivate and maintain a loyal, dare I say, addicted audience, you have to tell people what they want to hear, and you have to mirror their feelings back to them. So the people working at MSNBC today and CNN today, as we record this, Donald Trump is about to surrender. People are saying it's the best surrender that's ever been surrendered. As Donald Trump is getting ready to surrender, they know what the people have come for that are watching their channel, and so do the people at Fox News, and they're damn well going to try to give it to them, right? They're damn well going to try to give it to them, because otherwise it would be economically and career, it would be bad news.
Yeah, that may be true, but it's the wrong thing to do in my view. It's one thing if you're selling
Totally.
cars, if you're selling cars, you have an obligation to find out what your customer wants. Does he want an SUV? Does he want a compact car? Does he want a red car or a blue car? If you're in the house building business, same thing. Do they want big houses or small houses? News is uniquely or almost uniquely different. The audience shouldn't get a voice in what serious journalists decide. I know you're laughing at the word serious journalists. What serious journalists decide what should be on the news. But that's exactly, as you correctly said, is what's happening. It's wrong. That's my take. What do you think?
It is wrong. And the thing is, let's torture your car analogy, right? So if you're a car salesperson, you can try to upsell somebody, right? Somebody comes in and says, I just want a compact car and I just need a basic car to get around. And you can say, well, have you thought about the Flutterblast 5000 and it's got 9 cup holders and it's the best car ever and this is really what you need? You can try to upsell them, and that's fine. That's not even unethical. What you can't do is swindle. What you can't do is lie, cheat, and steal. And that's true as a car salesperson, and it's true as a reporter, too. It's true as a journalist, too. We have, though, even special responsibilities and special duties beyond that, because we say, it's like as I tell people, journalism is not a profession. It is a vocation. A profession requires specialized training and requires this graduate degree and all that stuff. This is a vocation, voce, calling. This is like being a teacher or a cop or a firefighter or a pastor, imam, a rabbi, whatever. You have to be called to want to do this, right? Most of the people who do this don't make a bunch of money. Most of the people who do this don't get famous. This is yeoman kind of work that you want to do because you're called to do it for whatever reason. And the reason it has to be that way is because it has to have built-in limits, right? It has to have, so I, as an American journalist, cannot practice kind of journalism that is bad for America, right? And there are people every day in newsrooms around this country who are asked to, and sometimes actually do, say, look, I know this is bad. I know that what I'm about to do is wrong, and I know that it's bad. I know it's bad for the country. I know it will divide us more. I know that it's cheap, and I know that it's chintzy. But then they think two things. Number one, Look at what the other guys do. They're even worse, right? Look at those rotten SOBs over there. They're even worse. First thing, right? Fundamental attribution error. The things that other people do that are wrong are because of their character. The things that you do that are wrong are because of the exigent circumstances and you didn't have any choice. And then number two, what they think is, it's just one story. It's just one quote. It's just one segment. It's just one whatever. And I'm going to do this and move on. But what we've done over the past 15 years or so is build a giant monument to BS, right? We have built giant, what do they call them? Ziggurats of BS, around which partisans, highly addicted, news obsessed partisans worship. And they come and today is a perfect example. It's very significant that a former president be indicted and charged with this is a historic event. It's all of that is true, but we don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know how it's going to be, and we don't know what the consequences are, and we don't know a bunch of stuff. But as I flipped through today, I said, I wonder what everybody's saying. And as I flipped through, this is of course what makes me a bad pundit. I've been on TV today, and they say, "Okay, Chris, what are the implications?" And I have to say, well, we don't know yet. And it depends on how we act, and it will be complicated. But that's a lot harder to sell than surety, outrage, and indignation.
Yeah, and if the bottom line counts more than integrity, if ratings count more than integrity, then we're going to get precisely what you said. Before I throw this over to John, I got to look up the word ziggurat before we go too far.
I think they had those. I think they had those down in McDowell County, West Virginia. I think the Ziggurats used to run a drugstore down in McDowell County.
Ben and Sarah Ziggurat, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. They had a great cream soda.
Right. Before I throw it over to John for some political questions, I hope this doesn't make you feel uncomfortable, but I want to get to your situation vis-a-vis Fox. I understand why somebody would lose their job, be forced out for getting something important wrong, but for getting it right is outrageous. What did they say to you? How did you react? What's your reaction now that you've had time to let this incredible, I can't think of a word equal to ziggurat sink in about how I mean, I almost sold my TV set, when that happened. That was wrong. When you get into right and wrong, that is as wrong can be. What happened? I mean, we know what happened with the action on the call, but what happened when they confronted you with it?
Well, look, the thing for me, I have been the recipient of lots of undue praise. I have been lionized. One guy compared me to a Soviet Air Force general who refused a unlawful order to deploy the nuclear fleet, and that he prevented World War III. And I said, I appreciate that. That's very flattering. I'm a commie in this story, but I guess I'll take it. And they did have great hats. The Soviet guys had fantastic hats. I have been the recipient of lots of undue praise. One of the things that has gratified me enormously is that in the process of the Dominion lawsuit against Fox and what has come out, two things have been memorialized for the record. One of them is that the reasons for my firing and for other steps taken by the network were out of the most craven kind of fear of short-term ratings decline. And ratings always go down after an election. People in who played in the this speaks ill of my sports knowledge. It was San Diego State, and what team played for the national championship?
Connecticut.
Okay, Connecticut won. So San Diego State fans probably were not tuning in large number to SportsCenter today, right? They were probably not saying, ooh, I can't wait to relive all of the moments of our defeat. That's what happened to Fox ratings after 2012. Numbers go down, and then guess what? They come back. But because these folks were unwilling to suffer even a brief downturn in ratings to say, well, there it was. We know you wanted your guy to win, but he lost, and now we move on and we take our medicine. And what changed between 2012 and 2020 at Fox was that understanding and that willing and that sort of fiduciary responsibility that you have to carry with you if you have news in your name. That it can't all be jelly beans. Sometimes it's got to be green beans. So the documentation of that panic short-term thinking was gratifying. But the other thing that was really gratifying was that my old boss, Bill Salmon, the world got to know what a stud duck that guy really is, and the enormous pressure that he was under, the pressure that he faced, and how he defended our call, and with a kind of, one of the things people don't know how to do as well in the news business anymore is be cool, man. You gotta be cool. It gets weird, it gets pressured, it gets noisy, it gets all that stuff. And you have to be true to the person who God made you to be. You got to stay in the cut and be cool. And that guy stayed cool. And his job was on the line, and he got fired for it, and I got fired for it, and all of that stuff. But he didn't flinch or bat an eye or do anything. And I think any young journalist should remember, and I've said this a lot, the time to decide whether or not you want to kill a deer is before you go hunting. That's what my dad used to say. What he meant was there are implications to the choices that we make, right? When we decide you want to be a journalist, you decide you want to do that, there are implications that you have to think through all the way down the line, that I will get to a point where it will not be in my career interest to tell the truth. There will be a time where people in power will be angry at me. That has to be baked in the cake when you set out to be a journalist, and you can't flinch from your job just because it gets weird in the moment.
One last thing. When Susan Scott, the CEO of Fox, who I assume sent you packing, says we have to respect the audience, that is the most cynical few words I have ever heard associated with journalism. I know what respect the audience. I know what she means by respect the audience. What it should mean is tell the audience the truth. You told the audience the truth. You got it right. And you paid an unfair price for getting it right. She is the villain in this. I'm not asking you to comment. I'm saying she is the villain. I wrote a book, my second biggest book and least favorite was 100 People Who Are Screwing Up America. If I ever wrote a book now, and I won't, she'd be number one on the list. You can comment or not.
The only comment I will make is I have never been more personally or professionally happy in my life. And I've had newspapers close out from underneath me, like a mine cave in. This is a weird business, and Fox News didn't owe me a job. And Fox News, as it turns out, made a substantial mistake in the way that they responded to the results of the 2020 election. They botched it badly and are still living in the consequences of that. I'm at News Nation. I'm at the Dispatch. I'm at the American Enterprise Institute. I'm here talking to you today. I got to write a best-selling book. I got to do all of that stuff. So, my passion for journalism is stronger now than it's ever been. And the strongest part of that passion is encouraging young people to do this work. But when I tell them that, I tell them something else. It's going to be weird, right? You're going to get fired. The things are going to close. It's not like this isn't going to work for Arthur Andersen or whatever the big consulting firm is now. This isn't like one of those jobs. It's a weird, interesting job, but it's also a backstage pass to life. You have to accept the vicissitudes of that as you sign up for it and sort of go with the flow. I was very frightened when I got canned. I was very frightened, but the thing that I was most frightened of was having to tell my sons, right? I was afraid of the implications for them, and I was afraid of being a guy who got fired, who didn't have a job. And what I found in very short order was that it had been a true blessing, and that it was a real gift, and that I got to reimagine my career. I got to reimagine my life. I got to reimagine a bunch of stuff, and I didn't have to walk around anymore wondering when the other shoe was going to drop. And it's been great.
Good for you, Chris. John, take over.
All right, Chris, I'm going to ask you just a couple of quick political questions, if you don't mind, starting with Trump's indictment. So far, anyway, the story seems to be of political help to Trump. It's bringing him an extraordinary amount of attention, even if it's bad or bad attention, I guess, depending on how you look at it. He's up in the polls. It gives him another opportunity to portray himself and somehow his supporters as victims of the deep state. And with few exceptions, his GOP primary opponents are actually standing up for him on this. I think that's something that he would, a favor he would definitely not return if the positions were reversed. But Chris, I'm curious if you think there is a viable avenue for a primary challenger to say to Republican voters something like, look, I think this indictment in Manhattan is political, but Trump sets himself up for drama like this all the time. He's in far more serious trouble on other more credible legal matters, from election interference to classified documents. And then to sort of ask the Republican voters, aren't you just all sort of tired of the drama that Trump creates for himself in the country? Aren't you tired of losing elections because of his poor decisions? Do you think a message like that has any chance of resonating with today's Republican base?
I've been on a real Grover Cleveland kick lately, and not just because he and I share a physique. I've been on the Grover Cleveland kick because America was ready to elect Grover Cleveland because America was sick and tired of crazy corruption, and America wanted a decent dude who would do his job and not be embarrassing and not be whatever. There are many Grover Clevelands about us today, right? There are many good public servants who do their jobs well and all of that stuff. We are told constantly and tell ourselves constantly that we need the next charismatic leader who will step forward and, like a Moses, lead us out of the place that we're in, right? So as you say, that we'll have the message that will say to voters, and they'll say, wait a minute, I never thought about it that way. Donald Trump is an a-hole, and he's always causing problems. And even if this one isn't his fault, we don't want to have to drag that into the general election. If I was running for president, I would say something like this. I would say, I feel very bad for Donald Trump and his family. They are in a very difficult and embarrassing position, and we're sending them all of our thoughts and prayers. And then I wouldn't say anything else. And I wouldn't say anything about Alvin Bragg. And I wouldn't really say anything about the case at all. I would try to move on past it and let the damage happen. But because Trump is such an effulgent, he is like the light on the back porch that draws all of the moths that all fly in, right? So if you're Ron DeSantis, if you're whomever, you're like, well, I need to get near that, right? But then you find out it's a bug zapper, right? It's not just a porch light, it's a bug zapper. So you fly over there because you want to be around the story. Ron DeSantis comes out and says, I will not extradite, Florida will not help extradite Donald Trump to New York. And I thought, well, you haven't even seen the charges yet. Maybe wait to have an opinion. I think a lot of the stuff in American political life today is Twitter driven. I think a lot of it is driven by the 5-minute news cycle and trying to gain narrow advantage in short spaces. I think you can, with DeSantis on this, DeSantis reminds me increasingly of Ted Cruz. The way that I watched him mishandle the question of support for Ukraine was indicative of Cruz's overthought, overwrought kind of approach, right? Well, I'm going to tailor my message to Tucker Carlson in this way to try to suck up to those voters. And then when I find out that I over-sucked up, I'm going to try to suck up to these voters over here and drive back across the lanes. Chill out, right? Be cool. Be who you're supposed to be. And either voters will like you or they will not like you. And I use Cruz and Elizabeth Warren as the most obvious examples of this. But the one, what do they say? The hardest thing to fake is sincerity. When you try to be the candidate that voters want, you will invariably fail because they'll smell it on you. And I think the candidate that Republicans will end up with, so Donald Trump's more likely to be the Republican nominee than anybody else. Democrats are ecstatic, right? So they love this indictment because it's double coupons. They get to see Trump humiliated and they believe that it will increase his chances of being the Republican nominee. I have no idea whether that's true. I have no idea whether that's true. And the other thing the Democrats ought to remember, just as they should have when they were trying to get a cuckoo bananas guy nominated for the governorship of Pennsylvania, sometimes the cuckoo bananas guys win. And it is a disservice to the Republic to push forward candidates who are willing to tear the Republic down. And so that is not really an answer to your question, but I hope that I evaded it effectively.
Oh, no, you did very, very well. Good job. So we are running a little short on time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and throw it back to Bernie. I know he has one more question he wanted to ask.
Two observations. One, the rest of the quote, Chris, on the hardest thing to do is to fake sincerity is, but once you can fake it, you got
That's
it made.
right. That's right. Once you can fake that, you got it made.
Right. And the other observation, which you could either comment on or not, I think we're a horribly, terribly, dangerously polarized nation these days. And I think cable news has a lot to do with it for all the reasons we've discussed. It's one thing to want to be successful in business and get ratings and report to Wall Street that your company's making a lot of money. But if you're doing it at the expense of the nation, if you're doing it while you're polarizing people, while you're making people angry at each other, it is a very, very bad thing. And I think we're living through it right now.
We are. We have used up the old. The United States of America reached a new consensus in the mid 1970s after a very wrenching period of time in American political and cultural life. Assassination of a president, his brother, the story of Vietnam and all of its horrors, political bombings, attempted assassination, on and on and on. We go down the list of a really bad dozen years from Daly Plaza in 1963 to the fall of Saigon and after Watergate. We went through a very bad run as a country. We came to a new consensus about how things were going to be and what it was going to be like. Well, we've used it up, right? We've used up that old consensus. Technology has pushed us. Cultural change has pushed us. Demographic change has pushed us. So we are making it new. This is the point where we are making it new again. And look, my book, the point of my book is to help people understand how it got that way and what happened in the news business to blow it up. But the end of the book is a plea to journalists and then a plea to news consumers about what your patriotic duty is when it relates to your work. And I hope everybody makes a great living. I want everybody to be as successful as they can. I hope people are innovative. I like tabloids. I'm a very permissive person when it comes to the idea about what kind of journalism is appropriate journalism. I cast a wide net, and I am a more speech kind of guy is good speech kind of guy. But we are making something new here. And if we make it new without understanding the principles in which it's rooted and what the debts and obligations that we have to America, and I say it all the time, and I know it's excessively corny, but I have to say it. I owe something to the Constitution, and I owe something to the million men and women who died in arms to preserve, protect, and defend it. And I'm not saying that every piece of drivel I write and every TV hit I do should be there on Mount Suribachi flying above the Marines. But what I am saying is that I have to be aware of the cost that was paid for the freedoms and opportunities and security that I enjoy. And if I treat that like a matter of no consequence, then I am a failure no matter how much money I make. And one of the reasons I really appreciate you and appreciate what you do is that you have been calling people back to that for 40 years, right? I don't know what year bias came out, but you've been calling people back to that in different forms and at different times in different ways all along. Tell the truth, honor the principles, and do the right thing. And it's boring and it's not sexy and it's not a shortcut, but it's what we've got, and we better get serious about it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Appreciate it very much.
Totally.
Chris, can you remind everybody?
My pleasure.
Thank you. Can you remind everybody what the title of your book is? I'll put it in the show notes, but I forgot to mention it up front.
I wish I had one here to hold up. It's called Broken News: How the Media Rage Machine Divides America and How to Fight Back. I didn't write the subhead, but it is Broken News, and I'm very gratified by the reaction it's gotten, because people left, right, and center in America know that what we're doing isn't working.
Amen.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Chris. Everybody, you can catch Chris over at the Dispatch News Nation on his podcast. I'll put all of that in the show notes. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. You have a great day. All right.
Thanks, guys. Very generous of you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.